again. Welcome to ManchTalk. I'm Tammy Simmons.
And I'm Carla Garrett.
Yay! And if you'll notice, Carla came much more prepared than I did today. She at least has a notebook. I have, my glasses.
I'm faking it pretty much.
But at least she has a good impression of knowing what we're doing. So, spring's, I think, finally here. Okay, we're now into nice weather. It was actually hot yesterday or the day before. Yay.
It's gorgeous.
I'm not complaining. I don't complain about the heat. That's what air conditioners are for. Things moving along. Lots of little stuff. I wouldn't say there's any crazy issues. But, in the past, since we taped last, I think, the school board appointed a new school superintendent, which is important that we have somebody. We can't just drag this process on forever.
Do you know anything about it? Because, as I understand it, there were 3 candidates. Yes. 2 were people who are already in the system and sort of principals of schools.
Yeah, Amy Allen was, I think, the principal of Parker Varney, and I think, she did an amazing job, so I don't really know what the reason was why the local nominees, and that's a lot of the discussion I'm seeing, is people saying, why don't we just hire from within instead of from outside? And without knowing the background, there's 2 schools of thought. One, yes, should the people that are doing great within the system, move up? But also, I don't think there's many people in Manchester who think we have a great system.
No.
So maybe somebody from outside can bring in some
and they've
newer, fresher ideas.
They've made the final determination.
They did.
It's this guy from Utah,
He is.
right?
And in the Union Leader article, and this did catch my attention, this is what it says. He comes from Salt Lake City. That school district has 24,000 students, 3 comprehensive high schools, 1 online high school, 2 charter high schools, 1 alternative high school, 5 middle schools, 1 K through 8 school, 1 charter K through 8 school, 26 elementary schools, 80 school administrators, and a $250 million budget. The district is a 57% minority. 90 languages are spoken, and 20% of the students are English language learners, and almost 60% of the students receive free and reduced lunch. So that's a pretty big,
How big's our school district in Manchester?
I don't know. I don't think we have 24,000 students.
I doubt it, right? Our entire population
I think our high school's only, I feel like I have no idea, but it's not 24,000. Okay. So, from the perspective of maybe we're bringing somebody in who has tackled far worse, or I don't want to say worse, far more challenging scenarios.
But then also,
things that are also similar to Manchester. We do have a lot of languages spoken, and we do have, a large minority population, and we do have a lot of free and reduced lunch, eligible children. And I like the idea that Salt Lake City had so many varied school types. They had charter high schools, and they had alternative high schools, and, maybe we need more.
Well, more competition, as we know, right. Actually helps to drive to get better results for everything. So, yeah, certainly seeing more competition. But then, with Superintendent Varga, he came from an external place.
He came from Rochester, New York.
And he didn't last very long, right? No, he had a 3-year term, and he booked out when probably some accountability was going to start coming
One thing this gentleman did say is that he plans to put down roots in Manchester. He's not looking to rent. He's looking to buy a home. That's important to me, too. I meant to look up where both of the other 2 lived. I know Amy Allen, I believe, lives in the North End. So to me, that's important. I would like to see more of our teachers, more of our all of our hiring preferences to be people within the city, because
I think that's a wonderful idea.
Well, not only is it, it's important, because if you're spending other people's money, it's easier to spend. But if you're spending money that's ultimately kind of your money, you might be a little bit more cautious.
And actually, there are lots of studies, at least regarding law enforcement, that says, if your law enforcement lives in the community, they're policing, that actually has a healthy
because
effect
the cop down the street,
because
officer so-and-so lives down the street.
Right.
So you're not going to
Well, and then everyone kind of knows each other.
Right.
One of the advantages of living in a place like New Hampshire is it's not big. It's actually exciting to be able to be like, you could plausibly know a lot of Manchester's people, and over time you do. I feel like, every year, I'm out on the trails now, and people be like, "Are you Carla?" And I'll be like, "Hi, where do you know me from?" Because you might love me or hate me, or somewhere in between.
Maybe I'm Carla.
Who's asking? But yeah, I mean, that's really one of the beauties of a place like New Hampshire. I mean, the entire population of the state, 1.2 million people.
Right.
City, 130,000. Yeah, you're not going to know everyone, but you should jolly well know your friends, your neighbors, your teachers, your policemen.
Or at least they should look familiar. I mean, I like the idea when I'm in Market Basket and you run into, whoever. You run into that person. Right. You run into that person.
I know the downside is when you have to start like wearing makeup to go out. I was like, I'll put on a hat and sunglasses.
I always say to Dan, just brush your teeth. Just make sure we brush your teeth. So we'll see how that goes. I mean, a lot of there seemed to be support from both sides of the political spectrum on the school board, so he can't be all bad.
Right.
I don't know. I think no matter who gets selected for these jobs, there's always a pushback on the job select.
Right, and probably also just, challenges, because I think part of the problem generally is, it's really hard to fix things because everyone digs in their heels and no one wants to admit when something isn't working as well as it could, and no one likes pulling off the Band-Aids, but I think for a lot of the challenges we see, maybe we need some radical solutions. Right. Maybe we need people to shake things up. Maybe we need to say, okay, this is clearly not working. We keep throwing, especially with schools, we keep throwing money at the problem, but there is enough studies out there now.
It's not the money, it's how we're using that money.
But the money doesn't change the outcomes, because what we have to be looking at is what creates an appetite for learning, right? How do you foster people's creativity and people who learn differently and all the things that we like to talk about when we talk about school choice? And how can we maybe introduce some of those things into our schools that we're actually meeting the needs of the children? And, maybe just getting kids to read and write.
Right. I had a conversation while I was doing the walk against hunger this weekend, which I want to, pat Manchester GOP on the back a little. We were
I'm patting you on the back.
Well, I didn't do it. Representative Mark McLean from, I think he represents wards 8, 9 in Litchfield. He organizes us every year, and we had a team of walkers, and we were I think we were the 4th or the 5th highest fundraising team,
nice.
Which we're...
I owe you money.
Yeah, I just was like, yay for us. So if we can be the 4th or 5th next year when we do it, I want to be in the top 3.
And then you were saying I couldn't make it this year, unfortunately, but I know last year we kind of walked on the east side past the route.
It threw everybody off because they changed it day of or prior to it. So normally we, these walks go down through the Mill Yard and, up and around and come back down Elm Street or maybe down Chestnut Street or whatever. They instead routed us past a bunch of the buildings that Families in Transition and New Horizons funds.
Okay.
So every couple blocks or whatever, there were people with bells and thank you signs.
Oh, that's cute.
Which was kind of nice. And, it is kind of important that people see that, what this money goes for. Right. On the flip side of that, I get to see parts of the city that I don't generally go in well, first of all, because I live on the better side of the city. I live over in West Manchester. But, we do definitely have an inner city. And it's a shame that some of the blocks are the streets are such a mess. I mean, we're talking about cleanups and everything. There are some landlords who, I'm sorry, should not be able to allow things to be piled up the way they are.
But what about maybe even working with Family in Transitions and saying to them, hey, why don't you get your tenants to
help
actually
us
do a litter pickup? Even for the homes. I mean, we see this on the west side, too. There, we have CMC... Notre Dame and the Catholic Church out there, and there are, there's church housing, and a lot of them are not well taken care of, and I'm calling you out.
Right. Well,
I'm calling you out. Tell your people who live there, hey, let's all make this better. Because also the thing is, you don't want to create a mentality where it's like someone else is going to clean up in front, right? Because it's like, no, that's exactly the opposite of what
we're not talking about elderly people who can't possibly take care of their side.
Yeah, of course.
Walking in here today, I did notice, Panush, whatever it is on the corner of Lowell and Elm.
Panucci,
whatever.
Yeah,
right?
I don't know.
The music place.
Yeah.
their outdoor seating extends quite far, which I actually like, because when Dan and I go on vacation, granted, I realize we do not live in Miami or any place that's, glamorous, but in a lot of those places, when you're walking down the street, you're virtually walking through a line of restaurants, right, where they're seating on both sides of the sidewalk.
And I noticed that too.
And I walked in and I thought, oh, this is kind of fun. This is the first time I think I've noticed that. And then everybody else is right within their little gate. Right. So that was interesting, because I can pretty much guarantee there will not be any issues in front of that location, because that would be within their serving range. Yes. So they're going to shoo people along. They're going, nobody's going to want to take up a camp.
And it would be interesting to know if that's sort of part of the thinking there, right? So since they've done it, now does Margaritas do it, and does the Republic do it, and does everybody just branch out another 6 feet? It was interesting. Yeah.
On the city employee note, 2 things. You were talking about, maybe new ideas and maybe something's not working, and people often don't want to. I mean, even in our own jobs, you do your things the way you do them. You don't want somebody to tell you should do it a different way. You just want to do it the way you do it. But we talked about this last week, and I saw it again. Somebody post again, a Manchester resident who went to go to the drop-off facility on Saturday and was like, what do you mean they're not open? And they're only open 2 Saturdays a month, and only till... And they were saying, don't I pay enough taxes that I should be able to go to the drop-off facility? So the comments were interesting, where one of the aldermen actually commented that, well, we can't, because we'd have to pay overtime, which you and I both know we can do math. If people are working 40 hours a week and we need to be open on Saturday, you just don't have somebody, you close on a different day.
Right. Like maybe a Tuesday when no one's probably going.
The answer, which I think unfortunately is the answer that we get far too often with government, is, well, the contract doesn't allow us to do that. So the government isn't setting services based on the needs of its residents who are paying for them. It's setting its services based on what some union contract is dictating, whether that's convenient, good for the people receiving the services or not. And that really irked me, because... Sorry, how about the next contract? We go from 40 hours to 30 hours, and we close on Tuesdays anyways. Right. That's the way people start to feel. So that set me off a little. And then the other employee situation, which I'm dying to know more about, was a retired police captain was given the job to head our fleet management. We have a fleet services division in the city. That was part of building the new.
So all vehicles.
All vehicles. They do all the equipment maintenance, because years ago it used to be the fire department had theirs and the police had theirs, and the highway had theirs. And when we built the new city buildings over on Valley Street or whatever, that was part of it, was that we could consolidate fleet, and it would all be done in one place, and it would save us all this money. Great. So now, apparently the head of that position, the position that runs that, which is a management position, and I'm assuming should have mechanical background, maybe, since it's, I don't know, was given to a retired police captain, and it's a $90,000 a year job.
Wow. Part-time, right?
Well, that's the question. If it's not part-time, I'm not sure that we're not in violation of state law, because... Oh,
and we should mention with that superintendent job, that's
$170,000 a year. And then I'm sure there's benefits, and, it's not a little job.
It's a pretty lucrative job. And, I actually do not necessarily have an issue with a good salary if the results are there.
That's right.
What I resent is when someone's getting like buco bucks, like the guy from Manchester Regional Airport who makes almost $300,000 a year, and is how our flights out of Manchester. I mean, I love living in the city. I hate going to Boston, and I like flying out of Manchester.
Right.
When I moved here, there were lots of flights. Now there aren't, and it's like, so you're not doing your job. Right. This new guy is new.
Right.
Fair enough. But I'm like, you're making a lot of money to not be doing your job.
And I think part of the I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but part of the issue is the airport authority is its own
fiefdom.
It is its own fiefdom. But we've got the golf course. We've got different little groups within the city that have their own budgets. So the airport's budget, I do not believe is covered by the tax cap, because they raise their own revenues. They have, there's things. So it makes it another little layer of differentness.
Or a lack of transparency
Right.
and no accountability.
Right. Something
would be
There's
the
definitely
different
something.
layers. You know?
But on this police chief, now head of the fleet division, I did reach out to a state rep who knows way more than I do about the retirement system, because that was my first thought is, so are you going to be able to get your pension from the city, which is a lot of money?
And we can't afford it.
That we can't
honestly,
afford, but, you know, are you going to continue? Does this gentleman, it has nothing to do with his, I don't know him from Adam, don't know his, I don't know. You retire, you get your police pension, and then now you're taking a job with the city, which city employees are in a different pension fund than police and fire are. That they're part of the state fund, if I'm not mistaken, and the city employees are part of the city pension fund. So we're talking about two different pension funds. So now, if he were to work the requisite number of years for the city, would he also get a city pension? And I'm like, wait a minute.
Well, and also, don't we have like RSAs that cover double dipping?
Well,
like,
that's what I asked. I asked, can a retired Manchester police officer take a city job and still collect his pension? And they replied that not if he's working full time. So then that makes me say, so are we paying him $90,000 a year to manage a department that I'm not convinced he has a resume that supports for a part-time position? So are we paying $90,000 for part-time work? And then I asked if his new job contributed to a new pension, would he be able to get that? They say no, because when you're already collecting a pension, neither that person nor the employer pays into the pension fund. And that's why you can only work part-time, because, and I was like, oh, okay. So then I asked one more, and I said, well, you know, here's the scenario a little bit. And they said, if he works full-time, then both he and the city are in violation of the law. And I'm like, okay, see, well, I was concerned that we were hiring somebody for an awful lot of money that maybe didn't have the qualifications that job should have. Because first of all, where do we post these jobs? How come I don't see them bubble up? I mean, I know people look, but how much do we publicize city, government
Well,
jobs?
isn't this person also somehow related to...
Oh, it's, oh yes, so that's a whole nother little tidbit. I'm sorry, there was a reason this bubbled up. Joyce Craig's finance guy, her campaign finance, fiscal agent
mm-hmm.
is it Arthur Godzoulis? Attorney Godzoulis. I know this. He used to own a house across the street from me, so have familiar things. He was her finance guy, and I believe that this is his sister's husband, his brother-in-law. Okay. So there's just a little too closeness,
So, I mean...
there's just enough to make people go, what's going on here?
And we have a conflict of interest and nepotism and all of those
We've
things.
never had nepotism in Manchester. No.
Because...
You're not in Gamache, that does not mean anything.
Those little incidences where people, have
vote
direct family and vote for raises
that
for their family members.
No.
We don't double dip.
No.
We're so ethical. We don't shoot and kill people or gas them to death.
We don't beat
great.
people up in bars or anything.
Yeah. So I mean, it sounds like there's some questions with this, and certainly, let's see if we can get some answers.
I would like to know if anybody out there knows, if anybody out there is even more familiar with the retirement system for the Manchester Police and Fire, because I believe they're in the state retirement system, and what the criteria is, or if you know about this job. And I also read that the current second in command, going back to Hiring Within, had applied.
Oh, okay.
So you're qualified enough to be second in charge, but the retired police captain's more qualified than you to be in charge.
Right, and I wonder, and correct me if I'm wrong, but people can. When are you allowed to retire and get full pension?
Oh, it's crazy early. It's like
50, right? Or
yeah, I don't. I'm not even sure. Yes, I think it's 50, and I think you had.
And that's with full pension.
That's full pension, which is half of.
Okay, so 50. I'm getting close to there.
Yeah.
I mean, that
Imagine
seems like
getting $50,000 for the rest of your life.
Yeah,
every year,
and
then going and taking a $90,000 city job.
Well, I mean, it's a sweet gig if you can get it, I'm sure. But
how are we?
But it's also like who? I mean, don't you? 50 seems awfully young to not be productive, right?
I say that all the time. I'm like,
whatever,
I don't believe you can. I don't believe that you could withdraw money from a 401k at 50. I think you have to be 62 or older or something.
And probably also you get taxed.
Well, I think at some point you don't get taxed. Maybe I'm wrong. When you're old.
Yeah, I think
you know what I mean. If
some stage it's supposed
might be 68. I don't know.
But I'm 100% confident that within the private sector we're somehow getting more screwed than the public sector.
Well, we are because
because we can't retire. I mean, I have been saying
I'm never
this so
going
many
to.
times.
I mean, we're not going to really
people
retire.
in the private sector can't retire anymore because they have to pay public sector pensions.
Well, and this isn't even
either.
This isn't a Manchester thing. This is not a New Hampshire issue. This is a nationwide issue. There are cities and states that are bankrupt literally because of their pensions. And you don't have to be, a very complicated economist or a math genius to be able to see that.
And honestly, that is an issue that is coming down the pike for New Hampshire. If I remember my numbers straight, I think there's a $6 billion with a B unfunded pension liabilities for the state that everyone's just pretending is not happening.
And when you try to challenge it and say, well, why wouldn't we just switch to a 401k, something more solvent? Well, they can't because it's so insolvent that without future money coming in, they can't fund it.
Right.
So the answer, which is the wrong answer, is keep doing this really bad thing that's costing people 10 years from now money because we don't want to do anything to the people who are already collecting these very lush pensions. And so we're not really doing anything for the future of our, like when you say, oh, you want to make things better for the next generation, we're not.
That's exactly my point, right? So I hear this all the time on all the arguments. And my whole thing in life is just, whatever you're going to argue, just be consistent.
Right.
So if you're going to make X argument on X issue and it seems to make sense there, apply that same argument across the board on all the issues. You can't
say, well, I like the government here. Right.
But, and so one of the things we hear all the time is it's for the children, right? Like we have to cuddle these kids.
Well, and we have to change we have to do this the Green New Deal because, the kids.
Well, the world's going to end in 12 years. And everyone just go back and look at what the greenies, and you know what? I love the environment. I hike everywhere.
I recycle.
I take care of it.
I consider myself a conservationist.
I'm just I saw this beautiful meme in the past 2 weeks about WikiLeaks, right? Where it was just talking about the left and the right and what came out of the WikiLeaks stuff because Julian Assange, of course, is in the news again. And it was this chart where they were saying, this made the Republicans mad and this made the Democrats mad. And I was like, oh, right, I forgot that with the climate change. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that came out of WikiLeaks that related to climate change and to data that was
just
false.
Not right.
The hockey stick, like all this stuff. And I was like, oh, right, we just glossed over that as well. Like no one wants to have that conversation. But so for the children, right?
Right.
And so it's like, but we've built an economic house of cards.
Right.
For the children. So if you actually care about the future of the children, I would suggest care less about, whether medical marijuana or recreational marijuana for adult use is going to, make the world fall in, and care about the actual fiscal things that are going to make.
There's no, if you're honest, you can see it. It's just there.
Yeah. And that is part of the question, right? Everyone's like, where are these poor people coming from? Where, why do we have the panhandlers on the sidewalks and whatever? And it's like, guys, there are answers to these questions.
Yes. But we don't want to hear those answers. We want it to be different answers.
Right. Let's just
it's like the end of Game of Thrones. People didn't. It's not that people hated I'm not going to give away anything. People didn't like the end. People didn't like the end. And I read an article, I think it might have been by the actual writer, who said it's not that people don't like the end. They just don't like the show ending.
Right.
So no matter how it ended, you're not going to be happy because you just wanted the show to keep going and it wasn't going to keep going.
And the thing is, I really want,
more Game of Thrones. You want more Game of Thrones?
No, we want, there's a roadmap to create prosperity.
Yes.
There is a way, and these ideas have been tested for hundreds of years. Socialism is not the roadmap that helps.
Look at Venezuela.
The people who tell you we can
provide for everybody and everybody will live.
You can't, because the question becomes who's gonna once you've taxed all the people who are the productive people, where do you go? The model has to be, how do we make as many people as possible
move up
productive, right? Like how do we a rising tide
Yep.
raises all boats, right? So how do we rise that tide for everyone? And it's not through handouts.
Never has been.
You know, and
help the people who truly can't help themselves. I don't want to see some disabled person suffering. I don't want to see the elderly suffering. You know, there is a slice of our society.
I also
that
don't want
needs
the
me to help.
addicts suffering.
No.
But the thing is, you can't incarcerate your way out of that problem. What you can do is figure out why
people are becoming addicted in the first place. What makes,
and there
I didn't become addicted. You didn't become addicted. How come everybody doesn't become addicted?
I mean, I think that, there's that, right? So I always say, if you're a productive stoner, you're probably going to be a productive stoner. And if you're like a deadbeat from the start, if you're a stoner, you might be a deadbeat stoner.
Right.
I think it has a lot to do with the person
Yes.
and not the product that you're using. But with opioids, of course, I mean, that is different because that is a highly addictive substance. But, I will also lay a little bit of blame at the feet of the state, right? They lied for 100 years about cannabis.
Yes.
And so why wouldn't people who are like, well, they lied about weed, maybe they're
else are
lying
they?
about heroin, and then people are like, oh no, heroin is really bad for you. Don't do it, But
why
I could see people being like, well, this
tell
is not
me-
my brain on,
I shouldn't eat eggs. I shouldn't eat red meat. Everything.
Right?
Don't eat eggs, eat eggs, drink milk, don't drink milk, eat red meat, don't eat red meat.
And the other thing I've been thinking a lot about is just this idea that there's only, what is wrong with looking to the state for solutions is that we say there's only one solution.
No.
There isn't. There are a myriad of solutions that work for different people in different ways, and that's what the market provides. It says, you know what, this is going to work for some people, this is going to work for other people. Let's experiment. Let's let
The best things
solutions
work.
come up, and we'll be able to pick because the market will pick.
That's right. Do want to take a couple minutes. One, remind people, so this is coming up is Memorial Day weekend. I hope everybody has a safe and wonderful long weekend. The weekend after, June 1st, 2 plant sales. We've got the Manchester Animal Shelter plant sale up on Dunbarton Road. That is Saturday, June 1st. I think it starts at 9 in the morning. It runs like 9 to 11, 9 to 1, something like that. Great way to get great plants and support the animal shelter. And then there's also one if you want to take a little drive down to Derry on the same day, and they have a great plant sale as well. And I did want to take a mention, and I'm going to try not to get emotional. Dan Pinard died. So, if you didn't know Dan Pinard, he's a wonderful man. He was very involved in the Manchester Republican Committee. Him and Lisa Gravel started For a Better Manchester a few years back, and they were out doing videos of all sorts of great things going on in the city. Tragic story. He literally just became ill one day and found out he had stage 4 pancreatic cancer just like 2 months ago. And don't mess with the pancreas. The pancreas is not your friend. So anyways, lost to the people here and the people in Manchester, and condolences to his family. That's all I got. See, I made it through. If you have any questions, please do email us at manchtalk@gmail.com. Otherwise, have a great weekend, and we will see you again next week.
Indeed. Bye.